and welcome to the channel. Look at the size of this beast. Now, we did cover this in a previous video when we were looking at some of the things that would be coming onto the channel. This amp is a beast. It's a 200 watt Carlsbro 7-channel mixer amp. It has 4 KT88s in it. I can't remember how many 12AX7s are in it, but we're going to open it up and have a look. Now, there's a bit of a story behind this amplifier. It used to belong to a friend of mine who sadly died of cancer in 2007. And he used to call this the fridge because it's nearly as big as a fridge and it weighs nearly as much as a fridge. He sold it on to the service engineer, the tech guy that I used to work under. And when he retired 3 or 4 years ago, he sold it to me, and I've had it in storage for a while. So I thought we'd take a look at this amp. Now, what I want to do with this amp is turn it into a guitar amplifier. But before I start going mad with the ideas, I want to actually run this amp up first and make sure that it actually runs and the tubes are good. The reason for that is this amp's got 4 KT88s in, and they are very expensive. 4 of those purchased would be well more than this amplifier's worth. However, this amp does have sentimental value for me, and I would like to turn this into something a bit tasty. Obviously, at the time he had this amplifier, we were all still relatively young, and we used to have big ideas about what we were going to, this would make a great guitar amp or whatever. But the tech at the time I worked under, he never really had the time to do it, and at that time I didn't really have the skills that I've got now. So we are going to turn this into a guitar amp as long as everything what we've got here is workable. So we've got 7 channels, and you can see that. And the thing with these Carlsbros is they always add these coloured knobs. So like here we've got green for the bass, and we've got yellow for the treble, and we've got the reds for the volume. A lot of them used to fall out as they have on this one. There were never any colour pattern to them, so you'd see other models and they'd have those same knobs on, but they might have red, yellow for the bass or something like that. The volumes though always seemed to be red, so at least they did keep that pretty much standard. So we've got these 7 channels, and then like where we've got master bass, master treble, master volume. Strange, that one. And I have a feeling, looking at this writing, and this is Jim's handwriting, the guy I used to work under, that he's done some mods on this, because he's got lows and lows high. So I don't know whether he's done some work on the preamp section. Hello, the bolt's rattling, or the cat flap, sorry. In comes Pink to pay us a visit. Where was I before you rudely interrupted, Pink? So we've got the usual thing: mains, switch, standby, pilot light, that's tated and loose. And yes, and these handles on the top, he actually put them on, because the original one, this amp's so heavy, the original handle just broke off. Yes, very heavy. I've just carried this down 2 flights of stairs and across the yard to get it in here, but it keeps me fit. So let's swing it round. I'll just get the crane in and we'll swing it round and have a look at the back. So we're looking at the back of it now. So we've got 4 speaker outs, and there's the impedance selector that's been added, that XLR, fuse holders, and then that's the power there. The power switch is a bit power cable is a bit dodgy, but that's no problem. We're doing a full restore on this and more. Right, we've got the back off. Look at those transformers. They are, check that one out. That is a beast. And they both are. Yes, if I'm afraid if one of those is blown, it's all over. Because we won't be finding anything to replace that, will we? 4 big bottles, KT88s, you can see there. Other than that, not that much to look at really. Yeah, it's all big. Right, I've just paid the crane man, he's taken the money and run. And we've got it out on the bench, as you can see out of its case now. And you can see just the physical size of those transformers. They are huge. But also, if you look in the background, you can see these huge electrolytics there. Now I've looked at the schematic for this amp, and I think they are 100 microfarad and 60 microfarad in one can. Don't quote me on it, but I think that's what they are. The whole thing is just huge. But I'm determined that we're going to turn this into an amazing amplifier. Right, let's just see if we can have a look inside. I've just got it off the tripod now. So I'm using this Galaxy S7, which I seem to be getting reasonable results with. And I've got a tripod for this, and I've just took it off so we can, because we can't get over the top with the tripod over that metal, that aluminium plate, that screen plate. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, excuse me, 5, 6 preamp tubes there. They'll probably all be 12x7s, and we've got an array of the volume controls. I think they're CTS pots, and these caps here, which are so grubby we can't really see what's on them. But as I said before, I think they're 100 microfarad and 60 microfarad in one can. I may be wrong on that, but that's how I seem to read it on the schematic. Now it's also got some, looks like some crayoning or some writing on there, and that's obviously upside down from the way we've got this, but that actually says old school 91. So there's a bit of history in this amplifier, because Old School was a well-known local band. So that's interesting, because I know all of those guys that was in that band. They're all getting on in years now. That's obviously 30 years ago. 91, 31 years. Right, back on the tripod, and we've got it tipped upside down, and we're looking at the gubbings inside, and you can see this is a PC board amp. Yes, you can also see somebody's added that at some point. A lot of epoxy and silicone and things there hanging around. And let me just see if I can find a pointer. We'll use this very large screwdriver, which has a washer magnetized to it. So someone has modded these channels at some time. So we've had a pot added there for attenuation, another pot there added, and it looks like there's been some modifications here. Not sure what those are actually. I have to look at those. And you can see all the channels virtually have been modded, except for that one. What else? So you can see the diodes here, and we've got quite an array of those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, there's 9 there. One will be for the bias. So yeah, there'll be 8 because of the way this transformer's wired. So the electrolytics you can see in the corner over there. I'm just poking around, and I don't have to worry about this being metal because this amp hasn't been switched on for years. They don't look in too bad a condition, because obviously I'm going to fire this amp up on the variac gently, so I just want to make sure that none of those look very sick, otherwise that might be a difficult problem, but it doesn't look too much like a problem. Now the other thing with this amplifier is, and there is 720 volts on the B plus on the plates of these tubes. That's a lot of voltage. So when I fire this up, I'm going to actually wear insulation gloves, and I can hear one or two going sissy, but I am not firing this amp up without insulation gloves on. 720 volts, and it actually recommends that on the schematic as well. There is a little comment that says put your gloves on. We've got to be very careful with this because there is a lot of voltage. Right, what else have we got in this? So we've got some mustard caps there, the old mustard caps. Those will be for the preamp. Those array of electrolytic cans. The screen resistors, normal maybe 1k. Yeah, 1k, 1000 ohms. So we've got four of those, one on each, quite beefy things. They don't look in too bad a condition, those. So I'm going to fire this amp up on the Variac, and to start off with I'm just going to run it up at about 120 volts, just see if we've got any life, and then I'll get the gloves on and we'll do some testing and power it up. Now this has got a PC board in there, and obviously I'm looking at converting this into a guitar amplifier, so that board is going to go altogether. There is no point trying to mod a PC board, and we want this to be radically different, want a completely different guitar amp in this. And as I've said before, one of the reasons why I want to do that is because that's what we used to dream of doing when we were young. So now I'm going to do it in his memory. The thing is, you know, to do this is a lot of work in it. If you look at the condition of the cabinet or whatever else, normally you wouldn't bother doing it. You know, the two advantages of this is, one, it's 200 watt. That would be maybe an advantage to some people who like a lot of volume. It actually wouldn't be. And the second thing is the sentimental reasons for doing it. Otherwise, normally I probably wouldn't bother. So we're going to power this up, make sure it all works, and then what we're going to do is decide what we're going to put in here. And what I thought is, I've got a few ideas, but what I thought is, if some of you left some of your ideas in the comments of what you think I should build this into. My two ideas are, well, I had three ideas. One was a 200 watt JCM 800. The other was making it into a Marshall Major, which was a 200 watt amp. And the other one was a Solidano, you know, something high gain, something along those lines, finding the right schematic and building that into the chassis. But we'll come back to that later. Let's get this ready for powering up. First thing we've got to do is put a plug on it, because that is tapered. So there's let's move this camera down. So there's something pretty annoying going on there. So I thought the best thing to do is check the fuses before we start. It's always a good idea. And there's no rating for those. It's not written on there. Really strange. So what have we got inside the HT fuse holder? Let's have a look. A fuse that's dropped to bits. Well, it appears it's got a 2 amp the HT fuse that dropped to bits, but I'm afraid it's got a 10 amp in there, and despite this being rather a large beast, I'm afraid there's no way that this needs a 10 amp fuse on the mains. Right, so I've put a 2 amp fuse in the mains, and I've put a 1 amp in the HT. That way, if we do develop any faults, we haven't got too big a fuse to blow. The meter on the right is measuring the HT voltage. The meter on the left is measuring the bias. I just want to check that we've got bias. I was going to put the probe onto the actual plate of the tubes, but they've been insulated. They've got like an insulation, it's like a silicon, some type of stuff. It's not silicon, but it's a type of insulation, which just shows how dangerous that voltage is on there. Right, so we've got a speaker plugged in. We're going to switch the variac on and just put a dribble of voltage in and see what happens to start with. Before that, I'm going to nip to the loo. Right, just I've got 43 volts on the variac. I've already got 143 volts on there. So we're just going to bring this up gently. So we've got 60 volts on the variac. I'm just going to check, make sure the volumes are up as well. So I've got the volumes turned up, which will be easier. As soon as we hear any signal, we'll know that things are cooking. Right, so we've got 75 volts there, 245 volts. 100 volts at 312. So I'm just looking to see if we've got anything on that grid, on the bias. We've got a voltage. Yeah, I wonder why I hadn't got, it didn't say negative volts, and I realised I'd got the probes the wrong way around, so now it does. So yeah, negative 20 volts on there, 100 volts on the variac, 310 volts on the 310 volts on the B plus. So 120 volts now, and we're already at 368 volts. We can't hear anything. I might just stick a cable. Actually, I can hear something. I'm just going to stick a cable in there, in one of the channels. We have liftoff, madam. So 364 volts. 163 volts, whatever. 364 to 120. So I'm just going to put another 20 volts on the variac. That's 420 volts now at 140 volts on the variac. So I'm afraid I'm off to get the gloves before we turn that up anymore. Negative 28.4. Although that's difficult. I don't really know what the negative volts. You'd see it on KT88s. Not that it's a huge matter, because of course in the end it's the actual dissipation calculation of 70% that counts. Right, where's those marigolds? Right, there we go. Because we're going to have a test round, and as I say, I ain't sticking my hand in there when it's at full voltage. So I'm going to go to 160 volts on the variac now, and we've got 478 on there. And we're drawing 390 milliamps, which is not a lot, is it, really? Yeah, Yeah, we do seem to be getting a bit more volume out of it now. I also need to start and just turn the volume down, because this speaker won't stand 200 watts. If there's one crack or bang, it will blow it. You can already hear that now, so we'll turn that down. And that seems to be running pretty well. So that's 500 volts now at 170 on the Variac. You see the bias is now up to -33. Those tube sockets are really slack, they need tightening up. The valves are quite cool as well. So we're drawing 364 milliamps off the mains. That's also including the Variac though. 180 volts. And we're at 528. 200 volts, we're at 585. So let's just excuse me if I get in the way of the camera. There. $334 on there. So you can see now we're at 591 volts at 200 volts on the Variac. We draw in half an amp now, 530 milliamps. So that's 235 volts, and we're at 685. We're drawing there. It said 720 on the schematic. We're not a million miles away from that, are we? But obviously that could depend on how it's biased, or you'd expect these tubes to be running quite hot though, and they're not. If it was, if you had more than 720, you'd expect them to be running quite cool. But it's creeping up, 690 now. So we kind of went. I normally set the Variac at 235 volts, which is a kind of in between. That's actually now set at 240 volts, and you can see now it's just pip 700 at that. Just bring that back. So you can see that there's some real high voltages in this amplifier, lethal voltages. And you've got to be very, very careful and patient when you're working on something like this. I'm not saying that if you got a belt of that it would kill you, but it would hurt, and it would be very unpleasant. So we've got a little bit of frying through the speaker, but that's to be expected given how long this amp's been stood. The other thing is I'm actually standing well back from this as well, because those electrolytic caps are old, and I have known those to explode, and one in particular on a high watt amp that we had in the workshop a long time ago, and one of the caps exploded, and it was like a shotgun going off. Sprayed all hot electrolyte all over the ceiling when it went. Although the ceiling was quite low, to be fair, but nonetheless, unfortunately it didn't spray it into my eyes. So yeah, so I think we can safely say that that's running okay. Now those capacitors are wired in series. They've got to be to take that sort of voltage, haven't they? And I don't see any balancing resistors on there, which means there's also no bleed resistors on there, because they put them on to balance the voltage out, but they also bleed off the voltage. So we need to make sure when we power this down that those caps are drained, and that 600 and odd volts we've got in there isn't sitting waiting like a shark in the water. So I'm going to oh right, I'll just check what we're drawing. 735 milliamps now off the mains power at 235 volts, 679 on there, 46 on the bias. So now we know this amp runs okay. Next thing is to power it down, make sure those caps are drained. I'm going to run these KT88s on the valve tester, and just to see that they're all good and reasonably matched from an emission perspective. You know, one of them isn't tired. And then we're going to call this a day on part 1. So let's just turn this Variac down now, turn it off. Let's just watch that voltage. Yes, it is draining away nicely, and we need that to be well down. Yeah, and you can see it's going down now, so that's good. Yeah, so we've only got three volts on there. Let's just check the back ones, but I can't see it being a problem, but we'll check them. Always check. Yeah, 3.2 in there, and we've got another one there. Check that. Yeah, 3.2. So the caps have drained down, and now we're safe. So I can remove this marigold. So there we are. So what do we turn this amplifier into? What do we want to make from it? So I've got 3 ideas. A 200 watt JCM 800, in which we'll remove that board and get a JCM 800 turret board and wire that in. Some kind of iGain amp, Soldano, something like that, or a Marshall Major, which would just be a much more simpler amp. What do you all think? Leave me some ideas in the comments of what you think we should turn this amp into. But whatever we turn it into, I'm going to need a lot of grommets to fill those holes on the front with all those 7 channels, because obviously we're going to be down to 1 or 2 channels. So I'm going to leave it at that for this one, and that's been an interesting little project, firing that up to make sure it runs, but it all looks good. So thanks for watching, and thanks for all the people that subscribed recently, and you all take good care, and I'll see you all in the next video. So bye bye for now.